In the United States, we have a situation where in many states, children who were put up for adoption seek to find their birth parents, and they find that legally, even though these records exist, they cannot have access to them. And they have little to no recourse in being able to get access to these records to find out who their birth parents are. And in my research on this, I read that even though this was a widespread situation, it actually was also a fairly recent situation, which with most of the laws sealing these records coming into effect beginning around 1945 and afterwards. So this is kind of a recent phenomena, but it affects many people in our country. And as we think about it, there are many reasons that adopted children should have access to find out who their birth parents are. The first reason is that children have a God-given right to know who their parents are. It's just a God-given right that because those children were born to those parents, regardless of the circumstances, regardless of the situation that brought them into being, those children, by virtue of being the children of those two parents, they have a right to know who those parents are. It's just a God-given right. The second reason is that there are medical reasons that children need to have access to their birth parents. For example, for genetic testing. If a birth parent has some type of medical condition that can be inherited, well, from a medical perspective, that child is in a better place if they know that their parents have that medical condition, and therefore they have a predisposition possibly to inheriting that. They can begin at a younger age taking steps to avoid that. For example, if their parents have some type of condition that develops later in life that can be kind of slowed down or altered based on starting a healthier diet at a younger age, well, those children need to know at a younger age that their parents had that so that they can start taking the necessary medical steps to prepare for potentially having that when they get older. That's just fair for the children so that they can do that. And a third reason is that in some cases, birth parents may actually want to know, and probably lots do want to know, but the laws can work the opposite, to where that even a birth parent cannot find out who their where their birth children are, because those records are sealed on both ends. So, we can think of several reasons why children need to have access. I mean, it's just a God-given right to be able to know who your parents are. It could mean the difference between life and death based on inherited medical conditions. And many parents want to know and find themselves unable to find out because the law basically seals them from being able to find out where their own children are. Now, if you want to know if something is good and it's something that needs to continue being done, the first question to ask is, why was it started in the first place? And anybody who looks at the history of this will be left with the conclusion that there were many people who wanted these adoption records to be sealed for wrong reasons, for really immoral, bad reasons. So let's look at some of the reasons that people have given for keeping adoption records a secret. A lot of people in the past, they got pregnant out of wedlock, and they were ashamed that they did that because they shouldn't have done that. And rather than be responsible and raise the child themselves, they decided to put the child up for adoption. And in the past, younger women would get pregnant, and their parents, if they were wealthy, they would send them off to these homes where they could give birth to the baby, and it just seemed like they were traveling for a few months, but really they were pregnant and going to these homes and giving birth, putting them up for adoption. Then they come home. Nobody knows anything about it. They were able to conceal that. Well, obviously that is an immoral reason for keeping a child from knowing who his parents are. Just because the parent was irresponsible, that doesn't justify you in punishing the child and keeping them from finding out who his parents or her parents are. So, I mean, again, we're looking at these reasons. We're saying that these reasons are not ethical, they're not virtuous, they're not wholesome. They're bad reasons. Another one is that in the past, married men have gotten someone else who was single, a single woman, pregnant. And they don't want their wife to find out. They don't want the community to find out that they got somebody pregnant. So they would force the woman or encourage the woman to put the child up for adoption. Is that an ethical reason? Is that a virtuous reason? Is that a wholesome reason for keeping a child from knowing who his parents are? No, it's not. And a lot of people are worried when they put their children up for adoption. They're worried that they will come back years down the road looking for money. Well, that's just an incredibly selfish reason for keeping yourself a secret from your children, from not letting them know who you are. Maybe our laws exist in such a way that you can put your children up for adoption, but just because the law allows you to do it, morally you are not able to shirk your responsibility for taking care of your children just because the law says you can do it. I mean, what an incredibly selfish reason to give, is that I don't want my kids to know who I am, because down the road they might come back and ask me to help them out financially. Well, you were supposed to be helping them out financially all along. I mean, from the very beginning. So, to shirk your responsibility, incredibly selfish. That's not an acceptable reason for adoption records being sealed. And we could probably come up with some other reasons, but the truth is, all the reasons that I have seen or have thought about, I can't find any good reasons for not letting children find out who their parents are. But I can find plenty of good reasons for having these records unsealed. It would be wonderful if today every state in the United States would unseal these records, and every child who had been given up for birth could go and see those records, find out where their parents are, try to find out what the circumstances were that they were put up for adoption, and if they wanted to, try and locate their parents to bring healing and closure for the experience of not knowing who your birth parents were, not being able to be raised by them. Now, for those who may be considering putting up their children for adoption, and I don't know what the reasons are. You might have good reasons where you just physically cannot take care of your children. And I'm not condemning people who find themselves in that circumstance at all, because things happen. Sometimes parents just become incapable of raising their children. But what I am condemning is this process whereby parents keep their kids, or state legislatures keep children from finding out who their birth parents are. When all is said and done, as a parent, if you have the option of sealing or unsealing your records, you need to keep in mind, regardless of the circumstances that you became pregnant, nonetheless, God gave you those children. And if for some reason you feel that you just cannot raise them, if they cannot grow up feeling hugged and protected by you, at the very least, you need to give them the benefit of being able to find out and know who you are. And even if you can't be a parent up close, you can at least be a parent from a distance. And maybe you can't be a parent right now. Maybe you've got some circumstance going on that just makes it, difficult or impossible for you to do it right now. Well, being a parent is a lifetime calling. Just because you can't be a parent right now, maybe you'll be able to be a parent 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road, 30 years down the road. You don't know. And you need to keep that door open so that you can be a parent. Grown kids need and want a parent also. And it's not just kids that need a parent, it's adults that need a parent too. So, don't deprive your kids of that. So, we need to be encouraging people, if they have the ability to, not to seal their records if they're going to put their kids up for adoption. And we need to be encouraging state legislatures to unlock these records and allow children and parents who want to find each other to be able to find each other. I'm Jennings, and this has been another Life Lesson.